Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at alchemy, but maybe not how you usually picture it. Forget the lone wizard in a tower.
Right. We're digging into the source material from the 16th and 17th centuries in the Holy Roman Empire.
And what it shows is, well, alchemy as a career path, a high-risk, high-reward one.
Extremely high risk. We're talking huge investments from powerful princes.
But also the constant threat of being branded a fraud, a Betruger.
And that could land you quite literally on the gallows. It was this intense dynamic between expertise, patronage, and the fear of deception.
So our mission today is to really unpack this figure, the entrepreneurial alchemist. They needed skill, sure, but also incredible salesmanship.
And massive ducal funding. Their lives depended on juggling all of it.
Okay, let's get into it. Why were these powerful princes, people like Duke Julius of Braunschweig-Wolfenbüdel or Elector August of Saxony, so interested? Was it just gold fever?
Not entirely, no. I mean, yes, gold was the goal, but they had serious systemic problems. Think national economic crises.
How so? What was draining their treasuries?
Oh, the usual early modern issues. Constant warfare was hugely expensive.
Right.
Plus, these massive Renaissance building projects they all undertook and just the day-to-day costs of running an administration. It all added up.
But wasn't Central Europe known for its silver mines? Weren't they still profitable?
Well, that's the crucial point. They had been very profitable. But around 1600, things started to change.
Because of the silver coming from the Americas.
Exactly. That huge influx of New World silver started to depress prices and make the old European mines, like the ones in Central Europe, less competitive. They began to stagnate.
And the princes were heavily invested in these mines, personally.
Absolutely. They were often the main shareholders. So a slump in mining hit their bottom line directly. They needed a new way to, well, sustain that whole part of their economy.
So alchemy wasn't just some mystical side quest. It was seen as a potential technology.
Precisely. A practical, maybe even necessary, high-tech investment to tackle a looming economic disaster. It wasn't some fringe idea back then. It was considered a serious potential solution.
That really changes how you see the alchemist, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They weren't just promising riches.
They were positioning themselves as experts who could potentially save a territory's finances, which explains why they needed such a broad skill set.
Right. They had to be more than just gold makers.
Much more. They were selling expertise in all sorts of areas. Take Philip Sömmering, executed in 1575, sadly for him.
What was his background?
He was actually a former pastor trained by the famous theologian Melanchthon, but he offered Duke Julius advice on improving local metal and salt mines.
Okay, practical mining stuff.
Yeah, and he designed a new kind of gun barrel that supposedly shot straighter, and he even served as a religious advisor.
Wow. So less wizard, more high-level consultant who also did chemistry.
That's a great way to put it. They were selling practical know-how. Books, techniques, secrets, specialized labor. It was a real market.
And they were smart about framing their work, weren't they? Connecting it directly to the prince's existing interests, like mining.
Oh, definitely. They deliberately blurred the lines. Lazar Erker is a good example. He wasn't strictly an alchemist, more a top mining official.
Okay.
But when he proposed a method to get gold out of silver, he didn't frame it as magic. He framed it as a business plan.
Really? Like, with profit margins?
Literally. He promised a surplus, a net profit of 70 or 80 thaler for every 100 marks invested.
Wow.
Straight up financial projection.
And Georg, Honauer, the one we mentioned, ends up on the gallows. He did something similar with iron, right?
He did. He pitched Duke Friedrich I of Württemberg, promising 800 ducats of fine gold from 1 zentner, that's about 100 pounds of local iron.
And how did he describe the process?
He used the standard term for metallurgical separation, Scheidekunst. He basically said, look, it works like normal smelting, like separating gold and silver, just, in this case, we're separating iron and gold, Mars and sun in their terms.
Making it sound familiar, like just another industrial process. Very clever.
It made the huge investment seem less risky, more like an extension of existing industry.
Okay, so it's clear they were skilled marketers, tapping into real economic needs. But here's the tension. If it was such a valued field, why was the figure of the fraud, the Betrüger, so dominant? Why all the suspicion?
Well, it comes down to institutions, or the lack thereof. Think about it. Other trades had guilds to regulate training and vouch for members. Academics had universities.
Right, credential.
Alchemy had none of that. There was no official body saying, yes, this person is a qualified alchemist. Success depended almost entirely on projecting a credible, trustworthy persona.
Which I guess created the perfect breeding ground for suspicion and, well, actual fraudsters.
Exactly. And the figure of the Betrüger became this really recognizable cultural trope. Humanist writers like Petrarch, Sebastian Brandt, Erasmus, they loved using the fake alchemist in satires to criticize greed and foolishness.
Like a stock character for comedy and social critique.
Pretty much. Often modeled on other distrusted figures like the dodgy merchant or the fool or even criminals.
And the core deception wasn't always faking the gold itself during a test, was it? It was more about selling faulty knowledge.
That was often the main crime, yes. Selling a secret, a recipe that just didn't work. Sebastian Brandt describes that classic trick.
The one with the hollow stirring rod.
That's the one. You hide real gold inside the rod, sealed with wax. Stir the crucible, the wax melts, the gold drops in, and voila, transmutation. The patron pays a fortune for the worthless secret.
They bought the performance, not the process.
Right. And this kind of professional deceit immediately got linked to, well, the criminal underworld in people's minds.
How so?
There was this idea it was a slippery slope. Barthol Behem, an artist, worried that failed alchemists, left destitute, would inevitably turn to crime.
Makes sense.
And Erasmus suggested that the skills used by, say, fraudulent beggars could easily be transferred to becoming a fake alchemist. It was seen as operating that sort of gray area close to criminality.
So, faced with this pervasive image of the Betrüger, how did the legitimate, or at least the established, alchemists fight back? How did they build trust?
They had to create a counter-persona. They positioned themselves as the real experts, the ones who could actually discriminate between truth and falsehood.
So they became fraud detectors themselves.
In a way, yes. Their strategy was often to teach the patron how to spot the fakes. Leonhard Thurneisser is famous for this. He actually created taxonomies of fraudulent alchemists.
Like a classification system for con artists.
Exactly. He described 4 types, the flashy ones dripping in fake gold, the ones dressed in rags claiming they'd lost everything in a shipwreck. All different styles of deceit.
A field guide to alchemical scam.
Pretty much. And Michael Mayer said something similar. The true alchemist's job was to help the patron separate the rotten drones from the proper bees, as he put it.
So, trust me, because I understand how the fakes operate.
That was the angle. Prove your own legitimacy by becoming the authority on illegitimacy.
That's a fascinating psychological game. Okay, let's shift from the image to the reality. When a prince did hire one of these experts, what was the workplace like? Was it that dark secret lab?
Sometimes maybe small private ones, but often, no. It was much more industrial. Princes needed results, and that meant proper facilities. Duke Friedrich I in Stuttgart actually converted a pleasure palace, the Alte Listhaus, into a big laboratory complex.
A pleasure palace. Wow. So not hidden away.
No, it sounds like it was a bustling place. Think complex equipment distilling apparatus, very precise assay balances for weighing materials, big furnaces, the kind you see illustrated in technical books of the time, like Peter Kertzenmacher's from 1570.
And you mentioned the space reflected a kind of hierarchy based on risk.
It did, yeah. You had the laborant, and these were often skilled tradesmen, like a former barber named Daniel Keller. They were paid workers, lower risk, probably doing more routine tasks in the main hall. But then the high-status alchemists, the ones with the big contracts and the big promises that often had separate, more secluded labs, sometimes even off-site, like in the Neuhospital or at Kirchheim under Tech. They were handling the arcana, arcanissima, the deepest secrets, and that involved more secrecy and, well, more personal risk.
And that risk, the financial risk especially, was spelled out in contracts, right?
Yeah.
How did they try to manage the potential for massive losses?
Oh, the contracts were key. They were incredibly specific. They'd lay out the alchemist's salary, the budget for materials, and crucially, the expected yield.
And the potential rewards were huge if they succeeded.
Life-changing. Johann Hofrister, for example, was promised 30,000 gulden if he successfully produced the Philosopher's Stone.
30,000. That's an enormous sum.
Right.
But what about the downside? How did the contracts protect the prince?
The clever clauses. Essentially, they shifted the debt. The prince put up the capital, paid for everything, materials, labs, workers, but if the project failed.
The alchemist owed the money back.
Exactly. The contract stipulated that the alchemist was liable for the costs incurred. So the prince wasn't just a passive victim if things went wrong. He became a creditor demanding repayment.
Which neatly brings us to what happened when things did go wrong.
Yeah.
The fraud trials and those, well, spectacular executions.
Yes, the ultimate consequence of failure.
What were the grounds for prosecution? Was it just about failing to make gold?
Not always simply incompetence, though that could be part of it. Often it was breach of contract. Or simply fleeing, which was a common occurrence.
Like Georg Honauer. He fled, didn't he?
He did, right in the middle of a demonstration in Stuttgart, leaving behind debts estimated between 13,000 and 19,000 Gulden. A massive sum.
And Duke Friedrich pursued him relentlessly. Was it because he thought Honauer was a complete fake?
Interestingly, no. The sources suggest Friedrich pursued him not because he suddenly thought alchemy was impossible, but because he was convinced Honauer actually had the secret tincture, the key ingredient, and was withholding it.
So it was about breach of contract and withholding valuable assets, not necessarily philosophical disillusionment.
Precisely. Honauer broke the deal. He owed the Duke either the gold or the secret to make it or the money back.
And the punishment was designed to be seen.
Oh, very much so. Spectacular justice. Honauer was hanged in 1597 on a specially built gallows 30 feet high, made of iron.
And the iron?
That's the chilling detail. It was made from the very iron Honauer had promised to turn into gold. Building this symbolic monument to his failure cost the Duke another 3,000 Gulden.
Wow. A message was definitely being sent. And that gallows wasn't a one-off, was it?
No, it became the place for executing failed alchemists. Just 4 years later, in 1601, Heinrich Nüschler met his end there.
What was the story?
He was a blind burgher who had apparently bought a tincture, a recipe, that failed during a test for the Duke. He confessed, probably under duress, to secretly adding about 11 grams of real gold himself.
Why?
Out of great fear, he said. The pressure must have been immense. But it didn't save him. He was hanged on the same iron gallows.
The iron Honauer failed to transmute became the instrument of Nüschler's death. That's grimly poetic.
It really encapsulates the whole situation. You see how the very success and vitality of alchemy, its ability to attract serious money and practitioners, was completely intertwined with the controversy around fraud, the Betrüger.
They couldn't have one without the other.
It seems not. The problem of who had the authority to practice, who could be trusted, was never really settled. It was just this constant high-stakes negotiation between skill, economics, law, and, well, fear.
So when we wrap this up, what's the big takeaway? This deep dive really shows the debate wasn't just, is alchemy real?
No, it was much more about who gets to do it, who has the authority, who gets the investment, and who bears the terrifying risk.
And that risk, that entrepreneurial alchemy, wasn't just a weird side note in history. It was a major feature of the economic and even scientific landscape for a century or more.
Absolutely. It shaped careers, finances, even the legal system.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. We heard that assays often confirmed the gold produced was actually ducat quality, at least initially. And we know people at the time genuinely believed transmutation was possible.
Right. The possibility itself wasn't universally doubted, just the practitioners.
So were figures like Honauer and Nüschler really frauds in the way we might think of them, deliberate deceivers from the start? Or were they perhaps more like desperate entrepreneurs who got caught in contracts they couldn't fulfill in a market driven by secrets and immense pressure?
Maybe their ultimate crime wasn't so much lying about magic, but failing to deliver on a commercial agreement driven by debt, maybe incompetence, and certainly, as Nüschler admitted, by overwhelming fear. Something to consider.